My next guest spent 23 years in the United States Army. He held numerous leadership positions in the infantry and armor branches. He assisted in disaster relief operations for Hurricane HUGO and Hurricane Andrew. His deployments include Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm in Saudi Arabia, and Iraq as a Generals Aide. I'm trying to remember what that part says. You know, you got a big bio, and I don't want to mess it up. You know, you've done a lot of colleges. You did a lot of college, which I've done none. So it makes me feel kind of dumb reading all this, you know what I mean? Because I don't have that college experience. But, you know, you're a tremendous leader, and I'm honored to have you on the show. You're also an author. You're a husband. You're a father. You're a grandfather. What's it like to, you know, have gone to all the colleges courses that you've been through, you know, being a leader in the military, being a husband, being a father, being a grandfather? What's it all like to take that all in and be that person?
Yeah. So I've been lucky in my life. I really have. I tell people, you know, this is the greatest country in the world. And I really do believe that. I mean, I've been in 44 countries on 5 continents, and you know, nowhere else in the world does something like me happen, where, you know, my mother never finished the 10th grade. My father never finished the 5th grade. Now they've got their GED eventually, but going to school, they never finished those grades. I went off to the United States Military Academy at West Point for a couple years, graduated from Northern Illinois with a bachelor's degree, retired from the Army as a lieutenant colonel. Nowhere else in the world does that happen. So I've been pretty lucky, and got my master's degree and those kinds of things. But really it is, it all comes down to what I tell young men and women as I go around and talk to young men and women, is that you can be anything you want in this country. Now you got to prepare yourself. You can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a doctor, and not have done anything to prepare yourself for that. But if you really want to succeed in this country, you just got to take the time to prepare yourself, and you can be anything you want.
I agree 100%. You know, I like to start it out by, you know, dipping into your childhood, you know, where you grew up, because that kind of builds, you know, kind of who you are. You know, like we were talking about before you come on, you grew up on a farm. I grew up helping on a farm that my grandpa had. It builds a different kind of person in you, you know, a work ethic that you just can't teach, you know.
Absolutely. You know, I did not grow up on a farm, but like you, I worked on farms all my life. Since I was 12 years old, I had my first job baling hay for $1 an hour. You know, so, you know, I did that all through up until I went in the Army after I graduated from high school. I mean, every summer and even sometimes into the fall and into the spring, I would be on farms working. And the work ethic is just, you know, you're up early, you go out, you work hard, you work till the job's done, whether that's 3 in the afternoon or 7 in the afternoon or 8 in the evening or whatever, doesn't matter. You work till it's done. And then you go home, you come back the next day and start all over again. And I really do. I give a lot of credit to how I grew up working on farms for making me the person that I am, because it did teach me that work ethic. It taught me hard work, and it taught me that there are things that are more important than you.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandpa was hard on me, you know, and thank God he was, because I don't know what I'd have turned out like. Not, you know, even my dad and stuff, they were pretty tough. But did you play sports growing up? What kind of molded you to join the military in the Army?
Yeah, so I played baseball, basketball, football all through my life. I played Little League, Pony League, Colt League, American Legion baseball, and then I played basketball and football once, you know, 8th grade on. And I played a couple of years of baseball in college as well. And so that always taught me the things. And I always tell people, jumping from being an athlete to being a soldier, whether it's enlisted or being an officer, is an easy move, because they teach you the same things. You know, in sports, you learn self-discipline. You learn how you're in shape. You learn how to lead people. You learn how to that you're going to get disappointed, and you're going to have to figure out different ways to do things. So I always tell people, making that jump from being an athlete to being a soldier is a very easy thing. And, and I was always the captain of my team. I grew up in a small town of 1,200 people. So I was always the captain, the baseball team, the basketball team, football team, whatever. I was in Boy Scouts and I was a leader in there. So I was a leader most of my time. And so it just became natural for me that when I got ready to go to college, I looked toward ROTC and the academy, and I wanted to be an officer in the United States Army. And it all worked out really well for me. Oh,
I agree. Judging by your bio, it was pretty impressive.
But I always also like to tell people that like you said, your grandfather had a huge influence on you, and I am who I am today because of my father. There's no doubt about it. He was like you said, he was kind of rough on me, and I always tell people he's a mean old man. But he demanded things from people, and his kids included, and so, like I said, I am who I am because of him. There's no doubt about that. And that's okay. I never had to worry about somebody being tough on me. I had some pretty thick skin by the time I joined the military.
Oh yeah. And being in the military, you got to have some thick skin, especially being in combat arms, because they'll chew you up.
That's right. We eat our own.
Absolutely. What was the best part of being an infantry officer? And then how was it different going into the armor part of the military?
Yeah, I loved being an infantry officer, and I loved being an armor officer. But being in the infantry, that was kind of always my dream, was to be in the infantry. And some people ask me all the time, why did I pick the Army over the other services? And because I had ROTC scholarships to all of the services except the Air Force. So I could have gone, Army, Navy, Marines. I had a Coast Guard Academy appointment. So I could have gone a lot of different places. And I always tell people that the whole reason I picked the Army, whether it was right or wrong, and I think it is right, and I think it's still right today, that in my opinion, the Army's vision or the Army leadership is all about people. The other services, it's about planes and ships and all those kinds of things. But in the Army, whether you're infantry, armor, but no matter what, a pilot, it's all about people. It's what the leadership is about. And so that fit me really well. My personality, my leadership style, what I wanted to be as a leader, it fit me really well. And so that's why I picked the Army, and I picked infantry because I knew I wanted to be a combat arms officer. I wanted to be that. I had an uncle who was an infantry, made it to staff sergeant in the infantry during the Vietnam War era, and he had an influence on me as well. And so I knew that's what I wanted. And then I ended up being a mech infantry officer as a lieutenant. So I was riding around on a Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, which I loved and I fell in love with, even though that's not what I wanted it's not what I thought I wanted when I first came in the Army. But then as it went along, I fell in love with that piece of it, and having the mobility and the speed and the firepower. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to ride around on an armored vehicle, I might as well ride around on an M1 tank. And so when I made captain, I switched over to armor, and I spent the last 18 years of my life as an armor officer. Now, not all that was on a tank. I did a lot of other things, but I was an armor officer for the last 18 years, and I love doing that as well.
Yeah. I know all about the Bradleys. I've done a lot of stuff with them. I was a Bradley driver,
Oh yeah.
Broke many tracks and many days in the motor pool. So
got that thing stuck a few times.
Oh gosh, through track, especially in Korea, it's kind of, you in the field there, you'll throw track in a minute. And
that's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I know all about the Bradleys. That was my first position in the military, was a Bradley driver. So it was fun, but sometimes I like when I got over to the, when I got to Korea, I was a dismount. So I wasn't driving. I wasn't working on the Bradleys anymore. And it was a lot more, Back then it was 7-8. You were training,
Right.
jungle warfare, trench warfare, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm not sitting in the Bradley sweating. Now I'm out moving around. So it was really cool. What school in the military was the best one for you and why?
Yeah. So I think, I guess I got to say airborne school. I was a cadet. I was in college, in between my junior and senior year, and I got to go to airborne school. And it was funny because it was 1985, summer of 1985, and I hope that in the summer a lot of cadets from across the nation go. So it's really heavy cadets there at airborne school at that time, and right at the end of the summer, so because people are doing some other things, and then the cadets come and they do their airborne school, and then they go back to school. So I always tell this story. I showed up to airborne school, and in our stick, the people who were jumping out the same time we were, there was a bunch of cadets, and then there was Navy SEALs. And
wow.
yeah, and so we're all sitting there, and I'm standing there in formation the very first day, and of course, the black hat, the instructor is yelling at us and screaming at us, and one of the Navy SEALs did something, and he told him to drop and give him 25 or something like that, and the Navy SEAL said, "Black hat, I don't drop for anything less than 100." And I thought, oh, this is going to be a long 3 weeks. And it was, but it was fun. We had fun, and it was great to jump out of the airplanes, the first time, and get that excitement and that thrill. And I think that was probably my favorite school. I loved infantry officer basic course, and I did a bunch of different schools, but I think airborne school was probably my most fun school.
Yeah, sounds interesting. I got to have a couple SEALs on the show, and then I had one as a changer, and they're just on another level of just.
Oh yeah, they are. They're animals. They really are.
They are. And I want to dig into some of your deployments, and like we talked on the phone, we won't get into certain things, but you were in Desert Storm, and then you were in Iraq. Desert Storm. Kind of go over what your mission was, the overall mission, and what was it like versus going back in Iraq? You know what I mean? The different kind.
Well, I didn't go back to Iraq during this last time.
Okay.
Not that I wouldn't. The Army just didn't send me there, and we all go where the Army sends us. Mm-hmm. But I did the first Gulf War. I was in the 24th Infantry Division, now at Fort Stewart, Georgia, now 3rd Infantry Division.
That's where I was.
Right. And I loved Fort Stewart. But we went to the first Gulf War. I was I was a Generals Aide. I was the assistant division commander for maneuver, his aide. So flew around a lot. And I had over 300 hours of flight time during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, because he was flying around. We had a mobile headquarters type thing, that command ship that he was in for most of the war. And so we jumped from place to place. We usually jumped from right around where the Cav squadron was, so as far forward as we could, and still be somewhat protected for the general. But so we did that, and we all know what the mission there was, to liberate Kuwait. And the 24th ID was one of the furthest western units in the American Army. I think the only one further west than us was the 82nd Airborne, and they were on trucks. So it was us, 82nd, and then the French mech unit that was west of us. And then we just made that big left hook, and we went all the way up to the Euphrates, made a turn to the east, and just followed the Euphrates River down to almost to Basra, within about 20 miles of Basra.
Yeah, when I was in Kuwait, we were at Camp Liberty, I believe it was, and we would go out. I was S-Force personal security at that time, till I went back to Alpha Company, and we would go out and get stuff. But you could see old vehicles from Desert Storm in this. It was kind of like a boneyard, and it says all around the berm, "Do not take pictures." And I'm trying to look over the berms, and because it fascinated me. Because I remember watching that on TV, and it just really fascinated me. And I was like, "Why ain't you allowed to take pictures?" I was so young back then, but I get it now. But yeah, that was it seemed like forever on TV when I was watching it as a kid.
Yeah, well, the Desert Shield part was kind of, and that was, that drug on, and we were all kind of ready for it all to start. But once we started, it was 4 days of, didn't get a whole lot of sleep during those 4 days. I mean, we were driving pretty much the entire time, driving and fighting for 4 days, and then it was kind of all over, and then we spent a little bit of time there occupying the little bit of ground that we took in Iraq. But really, again, the whole idea was to liberate Kuwait. And once that was done, then we all kind of came back. And I remember when I deployed, my wife, who was also in the Army, she was an Army nurse and on active duty. We had our 1.5-year-old son. She was 7 months pregnant, and I deployed for Operation Desert Shield. And so I didn't see my daughter until she was 5 months old. Because then, unlike today, we didn't have cell phones that, that you could do video and FaceTime and all that. That didn't exist. So I remember I got a call. General Scott, the guy I was the general for, he got a call from his office back at Fort Stewart, and they said that my wife went into labor. So I drove 2 hours to a phone bank. And waited in line for about 30 minutes. And I got my 15 minutes call to my wife after she'd given birth. And then I got back in the Humvee and drove the 2.5 hours back to where we were. So a little different than today.
Yeah, absolutely. Even when I was in Iraq, we didn't have that kind of, you'd get on the phone, it'd be so bad. You'd hear this echo. You'd say something, and as soon as it would echo like twice, and then you go to, they talk, and it was just so hard holding a conversation. So a lot of it was just over emails, So I can only imagine what it was like back then,
Yeah, we didn't even have email. I mean, it was,
Oh yeah.
So it was difficult, but I always tell people it was more difficult on my wife than it was on me. I mean, I was doing what I loved to do, what I was getting paid to do, what I've been trained to do. She, was working 8, 10, 12-hour days in the hospital as a nurse, and then having to come home and deal with a 1.5-year-old and a brand new baby, and then do it all the next day. I mean, that's tough.
I agree 100%. Now, when you got home, what was it like, seeing your baby for the first time?
Yeah.
The joy had to be overwhelming.
Yeah, it was. I kind of, because my son was 1.5 when I left. He was about 2 when I got back, a little over 2. And I thought, I had just resigned myself that he wasn't going to come to me and he was going to cry and he wouldn't know me. But he didn't. He ran right up to me when I came home. And then, of course, holding my daughter for the first time was pretty amazing. And my wife always tells this story that the first time she slept through the night was the night I came home. So here she's talking about all, being up with her all night or during the night, and then having to get up and go to work. And then I come home, and the first night I'm home, she sleeps through the night. So that's always one of the things she talks about.
Yeah. And, and she's dealing with your kids, and then has the stress of you being over there worrying about you. That stuff takes a toll on families, It
absolutely does. And that's one of the reasons why, I mean, she could have stayed in and she could have probably made higher rank than I do. I mean, she was a great officer and a great nurse. But we made the decision that rather than take the chance of both of us ever being deployed and we have to do something with our kids, she decided to get out and raise the children as a stay-at-home mom for most of the time, and she did a great job. People tell me all the time, when they know our son and daughter, they say, you guys did a great job raising your kids. I said, yeah, my wife did a pretty good job. I said, I was gone so much most of the time, not most of the time, but I was gone a lot, and so a lot of it fell on her, and she did a great job.
Yeah, I agree. Now, in your 23 years, what was the biggest life lesson you took out of the military?
I would say probably self-discipline. I always tell people, my father used to tell me, discipline yourself so other people don't have to discipline you. And I always lived by that. I always thought about that. But then it really, when you're in the military, and especially in your leadership position, your leaders above you don't have time to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You got to do that on your own, and you got to make sure that you're not being a burden, and that you're setting the example for other people. And the way you do that is through, in my opinion, through self-discipline. That's a huge part of it, because you're not always going to be motivated to do stuff. That's just fact of life. We're not motivated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's going to be days when you're not motivated. And that's when self-discipline tells you, you're not motivated to go do that today, but it's the right thing to do. Get up and go do it. And so I think that's huge, in my opinion, that you gotta have that self-discipline so that you can go out and do things that you may not want to do, but it's the right thing to do. And leaders do what's the right thing to do, even when it's not to your benefit, even when it's not nobody's ever gonna see it or know about it. It's still the right thing to do, and so you got to do it.
Now you retired and you spent 23 years. And when you retired, did you have any like, man, should I retire or should I stayed in? I don't feel relevant now.
No, at that point, I pretty much knew that it was time for me to retire. I wasn't going to make colonel. I wasn't going to make full colonel. And my wife and I loved it there in Mobile, Alabama, where we were living, where I was, my last duty assignment. I ran an Army ROTC program. I was a professor of military science at the University of South Alabama. We loved it there in Mobile. And so we had decided we were going to stay there at least for a while. And so it was time. And, did I miss being in the Army? Absolutely. I think you always miss the camaraderie and things like that you had in the Army. But, luckily in today's world, you can keep in touch with people pretty easily with email and FaceTime and all those kinds of things. So that helped a little bit. But yeah, it was time for me to move on and do something else. And I ran it. I was the associate director of the food bank for about 18 months, and a great organization, and did great things. And so that kind of helped. I went right into that. I thought it was going to take a month, at least a month of not do anything, just relax, go fishing, do those. And, the director of the food bank said, I really need you to come sooner than that. So I think I took 2 weeks off and went right into work again. So getting right back into work and running the day-to-day operation of the food bank kind of got me right back into what I was doing, being a leader and making decisions and those kinds of things. So I kind of didn't have time to think about not being in the Army, I guess.
Yeah. And this brings me to my next topic. A lot of guys get out and I guess they lose their sense of purpose. They're not the guy that they feel like they're not the same person as they used to be, and they start going to the VA, they got some, especially, your wartime, and, they're dealing with certain situations and they're getting pills and they're getting, they're falling down in depression, and some become suicidal, and if there was a veteran that called you today and said, sir, I'm feeling a little suicidal, what would you say to this person to pick them up?
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, remember what you did. And, I've had buddies who served in Afghanistan. Again, I did not serve in Afghanistan. Again, the Army just didn't send me there. And I've had some of them who have talked to me since, all the stuff that's been going on here lately. And, they were kind of questioning whether or not they wasted their time and whether or not it was, what they did was worth anything. And I said, and I tell them, I said, look, it doesn't matter what the situation is there right now, however that ended. That had nothing to do with what you did. What you did was honorable, and it was helping people, helping the people of Afghanistan, whoever you were helping in that region. you were doing what the Army and our country needed you to do. And so don't for 1 minute think that however this ended, that it diminishes your service during your time in Afghanistan. And that, I would say the same thing in Iraq or anywhere else. You gotta remember what it was that you did and why you did it. And just because you're not in the Army anymore, or not an officer, or not an NCO, senior NCO, doesn't mean that your value is any less. Just got to keep thinking about what it was that you did and why you did it, and that you still are of value, even if you're not in those high profile positions anymore. And one of the things I tell people is, remember that you can still help other people. And I know you've had that as well, where, you help somebody and then they were able to help somebody as well. And I've had that as well in my life. And you just got to keep reminding people of that part of the healing process is that you are helping other people heal as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of why I started this podcast is, we talked about the story, and it means a lot to me. I never understood it before, and I would be like, I had my own way of thinking why people done that, and it was kind of selfish, and I still somewhat don't understand because I don't have them thoughts, and I'm trying to get better.
I don't either, and it is tough to understand the thoughts, but doesn't mean it's not real, and it doesn't mean it's not out there just because we don't have those, and that's a good thing, and we're lucky.
Absolutely.
So we got to help the people who do feel that way as much as we can, as long as they, if they reach out to us, we got to help.
Oh, agreed, 100%. Now, if you could go back and tell a younger version of yourself some key things, what would it be?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I think one of the things that I would tell myself is two things. One, if you're talking about academics, do a better job preparing yourself for academically for college and for life. When I was younger, maybe I didn't take as much pride and put as much effort in my education as I probably should have. And I tell people, as young men and women, as I go around, and I do go around, I have been invited to go around and talk to 6th, 7th, 8th graders. And one of the things I always tell them is, you don't believe this, but right now is the most important time of your life, because right now you are deciding what you're going to be able to do in the future. So, and even high school, that's still the case. So I always try to emphasize that. So that's something I would probably tell myself, to make sure you do a better job with your education. And then I would say probably the one thing that I took me a long time to understand, the communication part I was always pretty good at, being able to speak and not be afraid to get up in front of people and talk. But the part that I did not do a very good job of in the communication realm was listening.
Mm-hmm.
Never wasn't one of my strong suits until I was probably a captain in the Army. And I had at that point, a lieutenant colonel who eventually retired, a 3-star general, who I worked for, who really taught me the value of listening. And the way he did it was, as I would walk into the office every morning, I'd pretty much, at least 2 or 3 days a week, I'd walk by him in the hall, and he'd say, "So how are you, Oak?" And it wasn't one of those things where you could just say, "I'm fine," and keep walking. He really wanted to know how you were, and he asked questions. If he knew you had some things coming up, he was asking questions about it. If he knew my wife, he knew my kids, he'd ask questions. Well, how did the soccer game go this weekend? He wanted to know. And here's a lieutenant colonel, busy lieutenant colonel. He was very busy. He was at the National Training Center, so he was always busy. But in the times that he did that with me, and like I said, it's usually about at least twice a week, maybe sometimes 3 times a week, I never once saw him look at his watch and I got somewhere better to be. When he was talking to me, I was the most important thing going on at that point. And it kind of drove that home to me, how important that is. And now since then I have tried to make a conscious effort to make sure you listen to people. And it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about with people who are hurting. You know, really what they want is somebody to listen to them. And if you can do that, that's half the battle, I think.
Yeah. Now I want to switch gears a little bit. You did a lot of disaster relief with Hurricane Hugo and Hurricane Andrews. Being there for both, what was some good things you took out of it, and you know that you look back on and be like, man, that was awesome what we were doing.
Yeah, so I think there's two things. I think for us in the Army, our unit, it was actually a team building thing. I mean, because here we were an infantry platoon.
Mm-hmm.
Got to Charleston, we weren't doing infantry stuff. Here's your warehouse. Start bringing stuff in, catalog it, and when we need it, you'll hand it back out. I never ran a warehouse in my life. I had no idea how to do it, and neither did my guys in my platoon. And so we just said, okay, let's figure this out. And so we kind of all came together, and there was a day shift and a night shift, and we were on the night shift. And so the guys in the day would hand it off to us, and when we just, as things happened, we'd figure it out. And so I think that was one of the things and that was just prior to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So I think that helped that platoon come together and understand that, there wasn't too much we couldn't do. I mean, if we just figure it out, I mean, that's just the way it is. And then the other piece of it was what we were doing for the community, helping to rebuild. I mean, I grew up in Northern Illinois, had no idea what a hurricane was, had no idea what it could do. I knew what a tornado could do. I saw plenty of those. Not even close in comparison to what disaster we saw when we got to Charleston. I mean, in the road going in from Savannah to Charleston, as we got close to Charleston, I mean, whole areas where trees were just chopped. It looked like somebody just chopped them off, 25, 30 feet in the air, just chopped them completely off. Just whole forests, whole trees, areas, just completely. We went out to the barrier islands and nothing left on the barrier island. I mean, wow. Houses gone. The only thing left were concrete pads, if they were even there. So, I mean, the power that I realized, again, having not grown anywhere near the coast, of a hurricane was unbelievable. So whatever we provided for them was all they had. Our cooks would provide stuff for them. We would bring in, people would donate food, and we would issue it out. We'd fix it and issue it out. We had ice that we brought in, all those things that if it wasn't for us, they wouldn't have had all of that stuff. So that was a good feeling that we were able to help. And I always tell people the two medals that I'm the most proud of having been awarded is my Bronze Star and my Humanitarian Service Medal. Those were the ones that it meant a lot to me that we did what we did, and hopefully it meant a lot to the people that we helped. And I think it did.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people, when you watch that stuff, all you see is disaster. That's why I wanted to ask, some positive stuff that come out of it. And that was really good stuff,
Well, and I will tell you that the people there, it really, human nature is real. The ability to overcome stuff is just amazing. Again, we come in there and it's just devastated. Almost all of downtown Charleston was underwater at one point. So everything was destroyed basically, and had water damage, whatever. But people are resilient, and there were people there who had nothing, who still wanted to help other people as well, and volunteer to help us do things for other people, even though they were hurting just as bad as everybody else. So it was good to see that gives you faith in the human race, when you see people who are hurting just as bad as their neighbor, but they're willing to give a hand to help them out.
Now, was y'all helping in getting people out of their houses? Or
Oh, that was already done by the time we got there.
Okay, gotcha.
We didn't have to do any rescues or anything like that. We were just doing recovery, helping them recover from the disaster.
Gotcha. And how long did that take? Was it
I think we were there about 90 days.
Wow.
And we were staying in Charleston at an old, I think it was a Marine Corps base that had been shut down. And so, there were just buildings, and, we just had, 10 people sleeping in a room, on the floor, and, no bunks, no nothing. No running water for most of that, because none of Charleston had running water at one point. And so a lot of, porta potty type stuff and stuff like that. So, it wasn't fun, but again, we were working 12-hour shifts, and we knew what we were doing was helping people. So it was, it made you feel good, even though it wasn't much fun.
Yeah. That's something I've never been a part of, is, Hurricane Katrina, I think it was going on.
Right.
When it was in Iraq. And I grew up in Alabama, but I'm sure we had hurricanes, but I don't remember them.
Yeah, well, and we, I remember I got to Mobile, Alabama in 2006, so right after Katrina. And there was still some damage in the Mobile area. Not a whole lot in Mobile, but there was some in Mobile. That was quite a bit further west. So although they got some, it wasn't like Mississippi. I mean, you drove down the coast along Mississippi, and I mean, looked like a war zone. I mean, it was just as bad as Charleston was, if not worse. And that was, Katrina happened in 2005, so it was probably almost a year by the time I got to Alabama. So it hadn't changed much in about a year.
So you were out there by Gulf Shores, huh?
Yeah, I was. I'm Mobile, Gulf Shores. Used to go to Pensacola a lot. Used to go to Biloxi.
Oh yeah, gambling.
Yeah, and then when I worked at the food bank, when I did the day-to-day operation at the food bank, of course we had the Gulf oil spill, which shut down a lot of the shipping. Like the shrimping business, the fishing business. So I spent a lot of time in the Biolabattery area, because that's all it is. That whole area is just nothing but seafood oriented, and it shut it all down. So we spent a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of resources helping keep that community fed and alive during that time.
Now, was it like MREs?
No, with the food bank, it was donations, and it was also we had agreements with like Walmart and the supermarkets, Eagles, and Winn-Dixie, and all the things that would donate food to us. So I always tell people, Walmart gets a bad rap a lot of times, but I will tell you that the food banks probably couldn't do what they do without Walmart. Walmart gave us a number of trucks, refrigerated trucks, gave us thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of food that we would take and hand out. And not, canned food. It was canned food. It was produce. It was some meat. They helped us keep that community alive, no doubt about it.
No, that's awesome. Now I want to dig into your book. I don't want to go too in detail, because you obviously want people to buy it and read it. You wrote the book, Your Leadership Legacy. And if there's a young fellow or someone in the military right now that wants to buy it, read it, and become a better leader, what can they take out of this book? If they want to become a CEO of a company.
Yeah. So I wrote this book, and it isn't just for military. So I wrote it because people always ask me, why'd you write the book? And I say, the reason I wrote it is because as I was going around talking to high school students and college students when I was professor of military science back in 2006, I'd always ask people, so what do you want to do in life? What do you want to be? and they didn't necessarily know what profession they wanted to be or what occupation they wanted, but a bunch of them said, "Oh, I want to be a leader. I want to lead things." And I said, "Well, that's great." I said, "That's fantastic. What does that mean? What does that look like?" And you get that deer in the headlights look, like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know what I want, but I don't know what it means, and I don't know what it takes. So I put together a presentation that could go anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on what you wanted. Probably, tell a few more stories, and I could probably stretch it out to about 2 hours, talking about what it takes to be a leader and what it takes and the things that it takes and what you got to do. And so then, and I've been giving that presentation pretty much since 2006. I've made a couple improvements on it here and there, but pretty much it's the same presentation. And so then I really want to get out on the speaking engagement, because at this point in my life, it isn't about money for me. At this point in my life, I want to get out and talk to as many young men and women as I can to help develop their leadership ability, because God knows we need it in this country right now. And so that's why I wrote the book, because if you don't have a book, obviously you're not an expert, right? So nobody's going to hire you to come speak if you don't have a book. So that's one of the reasons I wrote it. And I've always wanted to write it because I think it's an important subject that we need to talk about. And then people ask me, so who did you write it for? And I said, I wrote it for those young men and women, aspiring leaders, either high school, college, or junior leaders in a company, like my son right now, who got out of the Army and is a junior leader in his company, to teach them what you got to do and what it takes to be a leader. But then I also wrote it for old guys like me. I was going to say like you, but you're not old like me. So old guys like me, and I tell people like me, I said, look, are you going to learn a whole lot from my book? You might learn a few techniques and you might learn something. But for the most part, older people like me, or people who are, the CEO of a company, or even a mid-level to senior level leader in a company, what they're going to take from this book is they're going to read it and they're going to say, you know what? I used to do really well at that, but I don't anymore. Maybe I need to dedicate some time and effort to go back to doing that well, because that's important. And I think that's really why I wrote the book. So I think every single person who reads it, it's not about theory. There is no theory in this book. Theory is important, but that's not what this book is about. This book is about everyday things that an everyday leader can do to improve their leadership skills and abilities. And, it talks about some things that every leader has to be able to do if you want to be a good leader. And I really don't think it matters which profession you are. Leadership is leadership. That's my opinion. Leadership is leadership, no matter where you learn it, no matter how you practice it. I always tell people, I try to stay away from hospitals. There are people in there trying to do mean things to me, stick me with needles and things like that. So I try to stay away. But if you put me in charge of a hospital tomorrow, I can run a hospital. Yeah. I guarantee you, I got a lead.
Uh-oh.
People who do know how is what I need to be able to do.
Yeah. No, you put a good point on that, because you want to come to the Durham VA? We'll talk about that offline, but I'm gonna get your book. Like I said, I want you to sign it, and I want to take something out of it. You know what I mean? There's always room to learn something.
Oh, absolutely, Alan. The thing I always tell people is, if just like life, leadership it's a journey. It's not a destination. If every day you're going to learn something. It may not be leadership specific that you're learning, but it's going to be something that you can put toward being a leader in your life, in your whatever it is that you do, whatever profession. But leadership is a journey. Every day you need to get a little bit better at not only being a leader, but being a person, in my opinion. Being a Christian, I believe every day you need to try to do just a little bit better than you did yesterday. But if you ever get to the point where you think you've made it, where you're at your destination, I'm the best leader there is, you're in trouble because there's no such place. Every day you got to do it. And one of the things I tell people, these young men and women that I'm commissioning every day, that we commission every year, not every day, every year, and that we talk to every day, is that you got to earn your leadership every single day. You know, every day that you are in charge of somebody, whether it's in the Army or a company or a university or a sports team, wherever you are a leader, you have to prove to them every day that you have their interest in foremost in your thoughts and in your efforts, that it isn't about you. It is about them and the organization and getting better. So you got to prove that every single day. Otherwise, you're not going to be a good leader.
Yeah. Now, you're a husband, you're a father. What's it like to be a grandfather?
Yeah, I love being a grandfather. I always tell this story. You know, I get up early. The curse of being growing up on farms or working on farms and growing up in the military, you have to get up early. So I get up early. I'm sitting out on the sofa. I'm visiting my daughter, and my my granddaughter comes out. She says, "How you doing, Papa Dude?" And I said, "I'm doing fine." I said, "What do you want for breakfast?" You know, it's like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. She says, "Papa Dude, I want ice cream." I said, "Done. Let's go get some ice cream." And then we went over, got some ice cream. My daughter comes out and says, "Dad, what are you doing?" I said, "Look, I'm just an old man trying to get to heaven. There's no rules here." If she wants ice cream at 8 o'clock in the morning, she can get an ice cream 8 o'clock in the morning. So the nice thing about being a grandfather is that you can hand them back.
Absolutely.
But you know, that having said that, we did have our 7-year-old granddaughter and our 4-year-old grandson for about a month this summer, and we had a blast. My wife and I absolutely had a blast with them. It's just amazing how, you know, you watch them, and every day they grow. Maybe not size wise, but they grow intelligently every single day, and it's just it's great to watch them grow and make progress into great young men and women that they're going to be.
No, that's awesome, man. I got a couple more questions for you, and I'll let you go for the day. What is your all-time favorite quote?
I would say, that's a good question. I would say a Vince Lombardi quote. I got a couple really great Vince Lombardi quotes that I really like. But one of them that I really believe in is, you know, perfection is unattainable. However, if you strive for perfection, then you might actually achieve excellence. And so, you know, that my father, growing up, my father had what he called the 75% rule. And I lived by it growing up, and I still live by it today. And his 75% rule was, he'd say, "Son, if you're doing something and you can't do it better than 75% of the people who are doing it, then you have to do one of two things. You either need to figure out how to get better at it, or you need to go find something else to do, because obviously you're not any good at it." And so that quote kind of puts that in perspective for me. You know, you want to be the best you can be. Now, obviously, we're not all going to always be the best we can be. We're not always going to be the best at what it is that we're trying to do, but we can be the best that we can be at that. And if you're trying to be the best, then you're going to be good. If you're not trying to be perfect, if you're not trying to be the very best at what you do, then you're, you know, you keep coming back off that scale of how good you actually are. And as a leader, you owe it to the people that you're leading to be the best you can be at what you do. And especially in the profession we were in, you know, being an officer or a leader in the Army, you absolutely owe it to those soldiers, because their lives depend on it, on you being as good as you can be in that profession. So that quote is always one of my favorites. I love Vince Lombardi, even though he was a Packer coach. You know, growing up in Northern Illinois, I was always a Bears fan. But you got to love Vince Lombardi. How can you not love Vince Lombardi?
Oh, I agree. Biggest leadership lesson learned?
That life isn't like baseball. It isn't 3 strikes and you're out. You know, if something isn't working, then try something else. And if that doesn't work, then try something else. But keep trying. You don't give up just because the first thing didn't work. You just got to keep trying and find what does work, no matter how many times it takes you to try.
Oh, that's great. Favorite vacation spot in the world or in America, you pick.
Oh, wow. You know, I live in Daytona Beach, the vacation spot, one of the vacation spots of the world. But yeah, I would say probably, I'll put it this way. The place that my wife and I, certainly I did, and I think she did too, one of our favorite cities in the world is Prague. And we went there, I don't know, it was 1999, 2000, right around there. We went, so not too long after the wall went down, and they hadn't figured out what they had there yet, because, you know, Prague was not destroyed during the Second World War, because it was outside of our bomber range. Actually, it was outside of our fighter range. The bombers could have got there, but not the fighters. So we didn't send them that far. And for whatever reason, the Russians did not destroy it. So a lot of old, beautiful buildings. And we went there, and it was really cheap to go there. Had a great time. Beautiful city. So I would say that's probably one of them that we certainly enjoyed our vacation time there.
I'll have to look that up. See about going. Last question.
Yeah, my guess is it's probably not as cheap as it was back when we went, because they figured it out now.
I'm sure. Last question, and then, you know, you're retired now. What's your everyday life like now?
Yeah, so I'm retired from the Army, but I still do recruiting. I work for the government. I work for the Army as a Department of the Army civilian. I do the recruiting for the Embry-Riddle Army ROTC program here in Daytona Beach, Florida. And it keeps me busy. I think last year I was talking to about 650 high school seniors from across the world, not just the U.S., because this year we had a young lady show up from Belgium because her dad was stationed in Belgium, an Army guy. We had a young man show up from Okinawa because his dad was in the Navy, and I didn't even hold that against him. And he showed up here in August. So, you know, keeps me busy talking to all those young men and women, and going around talking to high schools. Now, last year, because of COVID, I only got to go to 5 high schools, and the rest of them wouldn't let me in. But the year before that, I went to 36 high schools, and I talked to over 5,000 high school seniors in person at their high schools. So again, never turn down a chance to talk to high school students. If you invite me to come talk to your high school, I'm coming, because it's so important that we talk to them. And even if it's not about the military, because I don't just talk about military. I talk about a number of different things to those young men and women. So, but we gotta put some effort and some emphasis on developing our youth today, because if they are the future, they're the next generation, whether we like it or not. And Master Sergeant David Powell, who's also retired, who was probably one of the best leaders I have ever worked with. He told me when we were at the University of South Alabama, he said, Colonel McCulloch, he said, what we're doing here is so important. And he said, he used this quote, and I still have this quote. I use it all the time, and it's in the book. He said, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations. And you can substitute that word nations for companies, for armies, for universities, for sports teams, for whatever you want. And it doesn't change the meaning of that and the significance of that quote, that every organization depends on great leadership. And that is what develops great organizations, is developing great leaders. And it's our job to develop that next generation, because at some point we are going to turn around to them and say, okay, we're old men and women, and here it is. It's now your turn. And hopefully we did a good enough job developing your leadership skills that you're going to do a better job at it than we did.
Yeah. To hit on that point, I worked at Hendrick Motorsports, and I'll tell you, Mr. Hendrick is one of the utmost professional guys I've ever been around. He's all about his people. And I tell you, man, he defines the word leader in my eyes. He is, he's a people person. He's all about your feelings, your family's feelings, and it was an honor to work there. And everything you just described, that's who I thought of first.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, again, I tell when we commission these young men and women as second lieutenants in the Army, I tell them that day, I said, look, today is a great day for you. It is about you today. Enjoy it. Because when we pin those bars on you after your celebration today for having reached becoming an officer of the United States Army, tomorrow when you wake up and for the rest of your time as a leader, it will never be about you again. It's about your soldiers or the people who work for you if you're not in the military. It's about your company, your organization. It's about in our case, the Army or whatever parent company there is. And it's about the nation if you're lucky enough to get that high end thing. Then if we have time, we can talk about you if we have time. But you're last. Whatever you want doesn't matter until you take care of everything else that is your responsibility as an officer or a leader.
We got a question. The name's Gun Sniper 3. He says, this is a great interview, very motivating. Does Lieutenant Colonel McCulloch go out to do speaking tours? I just saw this. That's why I'm asking.
I do. I've got a couple that have got me laid on. I've got 2 universities. I got one in Nebraska and one in Pennsylvania that's going to have me come up and talk. And then I've got a couple football teams. I got one in Oklahoma and one in Iowa that's talking about having me come out in the spring during their spring season and talk. And they're talking about using my book as their leadership development primer course, for their captains, trying to pick their captains and train their captains. And I've had several football teams who have done that. And I've had a fire department that did that here in the local area as well. They use my book as the primer for their leader development course. And then they have me come out about every quarter and talk to the new group of people. So absolutely, I will come talk. And if you go to my website, there's just send me an email, give me a call. All my personal contact information is on there. Just give me a call, and I would love to come out and talk if we can figure that piece out. Again, this isn't about me getting rich. I'm not in this to get rich. I can't lose money. I got to at least break even. But this isn't about me getting rich. I love to come out and talk to as many people as I can.
Yeah, and all your information will be in the description, so they'll be able to pull it up and look at it.
Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn. Not too hard. I don't think there's too many Oakland McCullochs on LinkedIn. Just me and my son. That should be it. And then I'm on Facebook. I've got a personal Facebook and a professional Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, although I still haven't figured Twitter out. That's
me either. It's tough.
Again, got to keep things simple for me, and that one's just not simple. I'm working on it. I'm trying to get better at it. But however that is, whatever method you need to get in touch with me, and I'm happy to talk about coming and talking. I would love to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Guys, if you like the content, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for more podcasts. Colonel McCulloch, I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you talking to me on the phone, and we getting this coordinated because we were supposed to come on yesterday and we had some difficulties, but we got it in, and I'm so glad for your time. I know time is precious to everyone, and you gave me an hour of your time, and I can't thank you enough for that.
Oh, Alan, I am absolutely thrilled that you asked me to come on and do this. If you ever want me to come back again, I'm happy to do that. Not that you probably will, but yeah, I loved doing it. I appreciate you taking the time to have me come on, because I know you got plenty of people you can pick, and I'm honored that you let me come do it.
Hey, we're having season 2 next year, and be episode 2. How about that?
Sounds good.
Absolutely. And I might do like an open deal where people can call in. You can talk to them.
I've done one like that, and that's fine. I don't mind that whatsoever. And I've done Zoom meetings where, people could ask questions during the meeting, on the chat or whatever, and somebody would read them to me and I'd answer them as we were going along. So I'm happy to do any of that, Alan. Just let me know what you want.
Absolutely. Again, thank you. Honored to have you on, and great podcast. I learned some myself, makes me want to be a better person. So
that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Thank you again. I'm honored that you come on, and have a great rest of your day. And thank you all for watching and supporting me. And till the next episode.
Thanks, Alan.
Yes, sir.